These are the things they don't tell you about being blind and deaf. I've been blind and deaf for a few years now, and in this video, I'm going to tell you some of the things you might not expect about being blind and deaf. So if that's something that interests you, stick around because the last thing just might shock you. Welcome to Being Blackout, where we hear no evil, see no evil, and speak no evil. I'm your girl Blackout, and on this channel, I speak about my journey about being a blind and deaf woman, navigating life, learning new things, and my journey of how I learned how to do things in a different way than I used to or normally would. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to be chit chatting with you a few things that might shock you about being blind and deaf, and things that you might not expect. But before we go ahead and get into that, before I get into all of that, go ahead and leave a comment down below on some assumptions you might have had about being blind and deaf. I know there were quite a few things I've thought. So let's go ahead and get into it. So before we get into the points, I want to go ahead and get into some backstory about my hearing loss and how I became blind. So I've been hard of hearing since I was a child. I've been losing my hearing since I think I can remember first grade, kindergarten, first grade, where they used to do those audio tests in school. I'm not sure if they still do those, but yeah, back in my day, if I'm dating my age, they used to do those eye tests and hearing tests, and I kind of failed it, and I wasn't getting the results that you would expect for a 7-year old to get. Now, my hearing wasn't completely gone or completely depleted, or I don't think it was even really that noticeable because I remember people always said I was so nosy. I was hearing everything. I'm like, I wasn't even in the room. Like, you hearing stuff in the next room. But I wasn't trying to be nosy, I don't think. And so I was just able to hear stuff in the next room or something like that. But so I thought I had good hearing up until, those tests. And then it gradually went, I think the next test was fifth grade and then seventh grade. And then it got really bad in high school. I remember my dad getting me one of those little Bluetooth things that you see on the commercials, infomercials where it had the old people and they had the little Bluetooth looking thing and put in your ear is like an amplifier to amplify sound. And I had one of those and I was in school. I was a little embarrassed to be wearing it, but people thought I had a Bluetooth and I didn't even have a cell phone, so I felt really embarrassed to be wearing it. But I needed it so I can be able to hear, so I wore it. I mean, I didn't let the embarrassment stop. I went ahead and wore it. So I had that for a bit, and then when I was 17, I got hearing surgery, ear surgery, just hearing surgery, ear surgery. So yeah, so that's my journey on that. And then I've been blind for a couple of years. I'm blind due to diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and I really didn't expect it to happen. Honestly, if I'm being honest with you, but it did, and so here I am now. And so that's just a little backstory. So yeah, and then so that's how I went blind. Back in 2021, I went completely blind just last year, and so ever since I went completely blind, my hearing it actually affects my hearing. So that's something you might not expect as a blind deaf person that being deaf will affect my hearing in a opposite way. Versus usually you got those uh little myths about when you go blind, your hearing gets better, or you go deaf, your sight gets better, or something. Which I would say that's a half truth. So what happens is when you go blind, you got to focus on all your other senses, and that because big major one is your sight, right? That's gone. You can't see anything, and so that's a huge part of everyone's life where we usually focus on our eyes and more than any other. So eyes and ears more than any other sense, really. At least that we pay attention to, right? So when those go, you got to focus on, or you're forced to focus on your other senses. It's not that they heightened, it's just your focus is more on those. So you're able to smell things that you probably wouldn't pay attention to before because you can see it. Or your taste buds might taste something a little bit better, or feel something a little bit more sharper, or hear something a little bit better, right? So what I mean by it did the opposite with my hearing. When I could see, I've kind of relied on visual cues and lip reading. So when I would speak with someone, I also use context clues. Maybe they're holding up something trying to show like, look at this, or their lips started moving. I didn't realize I did lip reading until someone pointed it out back in high school. It's like, do you read lips? I'm like, no, I don't read lips. They're like, yes, you do. I see you looking at lips. I'm like, do what? So that's been a huge, big thing to help hear is, and I can't do that no more. So when I'm trying to make out what someone's saying, I can't rely on those clues. So I'm like, huh, 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 huh. And food, they don't like that at all. So that's how that affects my communication. So what I can hear, I hear things is, so the next thing I guess I will talk about for the hearing loss is what I can hear. I'm not completely deaf. I can still hear speak. I use hearing aids to hear people. And even if I didn't have my hearing aids, I can still kind of hear. It's just very, very, very low, and I really have to strain or cuff my ears or get really close or something, make people feel real uncomfortable. Ooh, that's my favorite part. Nah, but so people always like, 'cause I can hear noise. Like, say if a person's watching a TV and the TV is really loud, I can hear the noise. I'm like, man, that's really loud. But I have no idea what the person is saying. The people are speaking because, first of all, the noise around it is covering up the voices, and then also when people speak, the words kind of it can. If I'm not used, especially if I'm not used to their tone now, if I'm used to a way a person speaks or their tone or something, that also helps. But especially if I don't not used to them, the words can blur, or I'm trying to make out what word they said. So I might hear them speaking, but I don't know what word they're saying, what the words are. It's like they're speaking a different language, really, a language I don't understand. And it's even more frustrating because it's a language I do understand. I understand English quite well, but it can be a little frustrating, especially when people don't understand. So that's the next another point that you might not think about is people not really understanding. Like, oh, how you can't hear this, but you can hear this, or you only hear what you want to hear. I heard that so many times growing up. So annoying. Oh my gosh, so annoying. But I'm like, no, because if I heard what I wanted to hear, I would have heard everything. Now, to be honest, there was sometimes I pretended like I didn't hear someone speak when I definitely heard them speak, and I ignored it, and I would just blamed them like, "Oh, huh, I didn't hear you. I heard them loud and clear." But so that's what it's like to hear. Now, for my sight, what people might not recognize and realize about blindness is a lot of blind people can actually still see a little bit, so they still have some sight. I don't know the percentage. You can look up the percentage of blind people that actually can't see anything, but they'll still be able to see some. So my journey of being blind, when I first started like really going blind and noticing, I could still see and do things and maneuver around my house and stuff. So to the point where people didn't think I was actually blind. They were like, "You can't blind." No, I was blind. I wasn't able to see enough to drive, but I was able to see enough to get around my house in familiar spaces and make out familiar things that I knew what it looked like before, so I can guess, oh, this is what this is. Or even I was even still able to cook some. I was even ah, I was able to still cook like on the stove and stuff. I could still make meals up until the last bit. I still had a full little sight on this side until that was gone. I was cooking. I was cooking in the kitchen on a gas stove top, making my meals from scratch. I was picking up cooking. I don't really cook like that, but I was learning how to cook better. This spice go with this spice, especially being blind. I don't know, something about learning how to smell the spices and taste the spices. Since now that I'm blind, couldn't rely on my sight. That actually really helped me learn how to cook a little bit more. Um, but yeah, so that's something that you probably don't wouldn't expect. Also, they don't tell you that you could still cook or still do things, you know. So um, yeah. So what I can see now, though, that was then. This is now. Now I don't see very little light. I'm completely blind. I don't see anything at all. Completely blind. So if you want to go ahead and know something about that, I did make a video about my blindness and what I see in that journey already. So I'll probably link that in the card above or in the description below. You can go ahead and go check that out and watch that video. So that's what I can see. And which is crazy. There's the next thing is common misconceptions about being blind. I already kind of touched on it a little bit with the what I can see and also what I can hear, I guess, and also what I can. Well, I touched on a little bit what I can see, and there was some other things that I touched on too, but whatever. I can't remember what else I touched on, but I already touched on it a little bit. But common misconceptions about being blind and deaf is when people think of a deaf and blind person, they think of Helen Keller. And I'm not sure about Helen Keller's whole story, honestly. I remember hearing a little bit about it, learning about it in school, but I really don't really remember her full story. All I know is I thought that she was just a fully blind deaf woman, and I thought she was born deaf and blind, which recently I learned that she was not born deaf and blind. She caught a disease. I can't remember what the disease was. I can't remember what it was, but she caught something when she was 19 months, what I remember seeing, and how she was an activist and all these things. And she learned how to read and write and with the help of her mentor, and like she lived a whole fulfilling life. And but when people think about that, they think about Helen Keller and probably think she's the only deaf blind person because that's what I thought. I never really thought about people who were out here being deaf and blind for real. Like I didn't even think that not that I didn't think that was a thing, but I didn't think that was a thing. Hold on. I was thinking crafty. But I didn't think that was a thing for real until I started going through it and I'm like, no, I was devastated to go blind because I'm already deaf. Like that's a devastating thing. But that's the common misconception. And like I said, we can actually see a lot of blind people can actually see more than they think. Most blind people can still see it. Also, a lot of deaf people can probably still hear a little bit as well. And then when you're talking to a deaf person, like maybe not like yell at them, um, but if they say something like, "Can you speak up?" Don't get lower because a lot of people actually get lower when they speak to you. When you tell them, "Hey, I actually can't hear you. Can you speak up?" They either say it the same wavelength or they get lower for some reason. And oh shit, they might damn well just get just quiet completely. I don't know, but I'm like, no, Can you just speak up a little bit more so I can hear you? And then, when you're blind, please don't just go up touching on a blind person when you see them, because that's kind of startling when you just come up and like, who are you? I don't know who you are. And they can't see you or anything. Like, don't do that. Ask them first. So that's something else. I know you're trying to be helpful, but just ask first. Let them know. And the last thing, last but not least, a lot of deaf blind people actually live fulfilling lives because they can do things. There's so many tools out here now in this 21st century, the day of everyone having doing DoorDash and everything. That's also another thing I didn't even realize about it was the delivery services and all these tools and adaptive. Now, voiceover was a huge pain in the behind to really learn. I'm still learning that, but they got so many adaptive technology I never even knew about. There's a lot of things out here that they can use to really get around and live their lives, especially with help of people around them. They can really do it. So it just takes a little bit more effort, but it can be done. Their life is not over. You don't have to pity them. That might be a shocking revelation. You don't have to pity a deafblind person because they can do it. They can do it. It's an obstacle and they gotta go a longer way, but it can be done. It's not impossible. And with God, all things are possible. Yeah, so they can live very fulfilled life. So if there's anything, what is the most shocking, most surprising thing you've learned about being deaf and blind or living deaf and blind? Go ahead and comment that down below. And if you learned anything really shocking, leave a heart down below as well so I can know. Being deaf and blind is a very difficult thing and it's hard. It's not without its challenges, obviously, but it makes things a little easier when you have a little partner in crime named Murphy Lee. So if you want to know how I got my little puppy, Murphy Lee, go ahead and watch the next video when I talk about how Murphy Lee came to my life and made everything a little bit better, a little bit brighter, and helped me get through my days. Until next time, I'm Audi 3000. Let's go.